Before it was the great city you know today, Rome was one of the most famous and powerful ancient empires, expected to live forever. However, when it was split into eastern and western halves, internal and external factors caused the once great Western Empire to break apart and eventually crumble. The constant threat of barbarians, along with economic and political problems like taxes, revolts, and just unhappiness with empires, slowly chipped away at the western half until it couldn't take it any longer. But because there is no one specific reason, this downfall is a complex idea and is very controversial among historians. Many factors played into it, and it happened gradually, but in order to grasp the topic, we will need to begin with Rome during the Pax Romana.
The Pax Romana, or Peace of Rome, started in 27 BCE when Augustus Caesar became emperor and ended in 180 CE. Political stability, urbanization, and economic integration all contributed to building a thriving and efficient empire. The promotion of trade and birth of new cities joined the vast empire together for a new unified front. However, this prosperous time did not last forever.
The 3rd century crisis was a difficult time following the Pax Romana. A growing threat of Germanic tribes and the end of military expansion, the dangerous power of the army, and disease contributed to the chaotic empire. Political chaos involved a cycle of new emperors, revolts, and invasions. Economic chaos consisted of a cycle of raised taxes, inflation, and a high demand of money and debt. It seemed like those cycles would never end.
The Emperor Diocletian was primarily responsible for pulling Rome out of the 3rd century crisis in 284 CE. Trying to repair the empire from civil war, invasion, and plague was no small feat, but Diocletian succeeded by creating reforms. These reforms promised defense, a more efficient government, and protection for the emperor. The army needed to be more sustainable but not powerful enough to overthrow the empire. To combat this, Diocletian made the army twice as big by filling it with Germanic tribesmen. He then separated it into 2 individual sections so there is less threat of a takeover. Also, it was not realistic for one person to control the huge empire, so Diocletian divided it into west and east halves, each with its own emperor and administration. Along with this came a more established bureaucratic system, including higher taxes. Diocletian's reforms saved Rome to live on for 2 more centuries. They initially created a more secure and economically stable empire, but they eventually doomed it. The reforms allowed tribesmen to get a better feel for the empire, helping them invade later and taking away the security that Diocletian tried to provide.
One of the main causes of depopulation occurred during the reign of Marcus Aurelius around 160 AD, when an army returned with a plague that killed over 2,000 people each day. Much of the economic decline stemmed from depopulation. For example, depopulation caused a lower agricultural production because there weren't as many farmers producing food. This led to a shortage of food and raised prices of products. Consequently, there was an increase in poverty, which discouraged people from having children, leading to an even greater loss in population. Another thing depopulation caused was raised taxes. Because there were less people to collect taxes from, the government raised them, but because tax amounts did not depend on income and ability to pay, the lower class ended up paying a greater amount of their salary than the rich, causing the lower class to get poorer while the upper class remained wealthy. Subsequently, as taxes became increasingly difficult to collect, the government began cutting silver from coins until they were essentially worthless. Another effect of depopulation was a reduced number of recruits in the army, which made it more difficult for Rome to fight off enemies. Because of this, Marcus Aurelius began recruiting Germanic tribesmen.
Germanic tribesmen, who were commonly referred to as barbarians, also played a large role in the disintegration of the Western Roman Empire. They were originally spread into small tribal groups above Rome, but when the Huns invaded them, they were pushed into the Roman Empire. They weren't warmly welcomed by the Romans, but they did manage to live there by making agreements with them. As we saw in Diocletian's reforms, they were allowed to fight in the army. They fought simply, usually without armor or just a helmet. They were loyal to their chiefs and wanted to die bravely for them. but they were still far less armed and trained than the Roman soldiers. The Roman people were not very friendly with them, and the bad treatment of the Roman government and people made the idea of conquering the land even more appealing than it already was. So as the Roman government was experiencing internal and external problems, the Germanic tribesmen continued to fight little battles. Most historians agree that the main reason they defeated the Roman army was because of their timing, and that if they had attacked Rome during the Pax Romana, they surely would have lost. It is important, however, to emphasize that they attacked multiple times. For example, in 410, the Visigoths, who were fighting with Rome, turned against them and ended up settling down in their own part of the Western Roman Empire. Also, in 455, the Vandals attacked because the new emperor didn't want to keep the same promises that the one before made. They won and kept their land in the northern part of the Western Roman Empire. Finally, in 476 CE, Odoacer, a German general, deposed of the last Roman Empire. Some historians believe that 476 was when the Western Roman Empire officially came to an end, but it is controversial.
While no two empires are the same, there are broad similarities between the disintegration of Rome and the fall of the Persian and Chinese empires. All three had controversy over choosing their next leader, shown in succession battles or the accidental rapid death of several emperors. This often led to civil wars, with generals or officials gaining a powerful following and fighting each other. In the lower class, revolts were often started because of their difficult economic situation. All of these causes could be grouped either into the weakening of the core of the empire or the strengthening of the outside, which ultimately causes disintegration.
In the end, Rome did not disintegrate for one specific reason, but a combination of several threats that, put together, overwhelmed Rome and caused its demise. External pressures, such as multiple invasions from Germanic tribes, and combined with internal corruption and chaos, came together and made a once invincible empire disintegrate. People ask the question, why, or how did the Western Roman Empire fall? But did Rome really fall? It might not be a big, strong empire it was once, but it is now a flourishing city in Italy.